Well, weekum? Swedish word for welcome. Anyways, welcome to week 8. We're going to continue on and finish up chapter 4 and then get into first couple sections of chapter 5. So kind of continue on with the chapter 8. I just kind of want to talk about a few things about looping. First of all, you'll notice in chapter 3 we covered breaks and continue, and those were used with the switch statement. You can use breaks and continues and loops, but it's kind of you shouldn't do that. Okay, there'll be certain times where you may need to do that. Maybe you're going through a loop, and as soon as you hit this particular thing, you want to get out. Okay, I would really reluctantly try to stay away from breaks and continues. Let your loop do what it's supposed to do. If you need to get out, then there's other ways to do it. So that's kind of what they're talking about here in section 4.8. So then kind of at the bottom of that page, which is page 233, it talks about when do you use each loop. Well, the while loop is you're going to use that anytime that you need to do a loop, but there may be times you won't even do the loop at all. Okay, so you have a choice to whether we need to do the loop or we don't need to do the loop. It depends on the criteria that's coming in place. The do while loop says we're going to do it at least once. We're going to do it once, and then we may not do it ever again, or we might basically continue on. So do while says I'm going to do it at least once. In those types of cases, you may have to initialize some type of a variable or some type of parameter. You need to do that at least once to set that, and then basically whether you need to do it again or not is up to the criteria at hand. For loop says, hey, I know how many times I need to do this loop. Maybe I have a counter where I've counted so many students, maybe so many cars, whatever the case may be. You have some type of counter. You know how many times you need to do that loop, so you use the for loop. So kind of wrapping up with loops there. On the next page, we start getting into file input and output. Okay, so this is kind of some really cool stuff here. We're going to use just simple text files at this point, but you can write to a text file or you can read from a text file. So let's just dive right into some code here. And the first type of code we're going to get into is the is the file write demo. So let's take a look at the file write demo on page 237. And the very first thing you'll notice is we have a new import statement. We now have an import java.io. Now, one thing I do want to point out here, if you look at this code, it says java.io.*. Realize there's other. We can drill down to the specific APIs we need to bring in. I could have just done this. I could have just typed in java.*, and I would only need just that one statement. Now the problem with that is there's a lot of APIs under the Java parameter. So we would be bringing in a lot of stuff that we don't need. So it's really best to go ahead and take this out as far as it needs to go. There's a lot of parameters, APIs under the util. So you could actually util.*, and there's a lot that's going to be brought in there. But again, let's just bring in the ones that we need to bring in. So in this case, we got the IO, and again, there's a lot of IO stuff, reads and writes and all kinds of different things. We're just going to go ahead and do the .* for now. So that's going to bring in all the APIs we need for reading and writing. So I have my file write demo class. I've got my first method, which is my main, it means it's executable, and I create 3 variables, 2 strings, friend name, our file name, friend name, and then an integer called number of friends. I'm going to go ahead and get this from the console by typing in the keyboard, and then I'm going to ask how many friends do you have. Number of friends is going to be that whatever we read in from that and convert it to an integer. And then I go ahead and do next line, and then I say enter the file name. I'll go ahead and type in a file name, and then I use the printer output file. So now here we're going to use some IO parameter stuff, API stuff here. So I'm creating a variable called print writer. I'm going to use a API called print writer. I'm creating a variable called output file, and it's going to be equal to the class print writer and then whatever we typed in the file name. Okay, so I now have a print writer class in this item right here, and it's going to have the file name that we typed in up above here. Now I'm going to use my for next. I should use my for loop, and that is going to loop through how many times we typed in our friends, how many friends we typed in. And then it basically says sys out the name of my friend is, and then basically whatever we type in the keyboard, we type in file name, and then we go ahead and write it to that file. Okay, so this is a write demo, so it's going to write to this file that we type up above here. Okay, so and then when we get done, now very important, if we open a file, which is what it did right here, this creates and then opens the file. Whenever we open a file, we always got to make sure that we close it. Okay, in this case we're going to do it right before we exit out of the program, and then we go ahead and write the data was written to the file. Okay, so if we were to run this now, I'm going to talk about this in a second. I just happen to know I'm going to go ahead and say for friends, and the file name is myfriends.txt, and nope, I don't want to do this. Shoot. Let me see if I can kill it. I think I might have just overwritten that file. I didn't do that. Oh gosh. Well, I guess I'll have to override them. Okay, so we'll say Joe, Steve, Sue, and Pam. Okay, so data was written to the file. Now, where did that get written to? Well, if I go out to, so let me bring over. So go over here to Windows Explorer, and I happen to go to my C drive, and I go to my users, and there I am, and I go to my workspace, and if we look over here, this is week A underscore chap 4 underscore 5. If I scroll down, and there's my week A chap 4 underscore 5, open that up, you'll see that there is the myfriend.txt. So it gets written at that high level folder. And if I open it and double click on it and open it up, there's Joe, Steve, Sue, and Pam. Okay. Now I could come in here and type in we'll say Josie, we'll say, or Jose, sorry, we'll say Jose, and we'll say George, and we'll say Mike. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. Whoop, maybe close it, and it should get saved. And so now let me go back to Eclipse. So let me go back to Eclipse, and here we are. And now let's take a look at the file read demo. And okay, so here we are. Again, we've got our java.io asterisk. We've got our main, same keyboard, system file print out into the file name. We type in the file name. Basically, same type of stuff here. So now I have a file class, and I'm creating a variable called file from a file class. It's being instantiated as a new file, and it's going to have this as the file name. Then I go ahead and get that file by typing it out, and then say while input file dot has next. Wow, that's pretty cool. Here's how it works. It looks at the very first record, and it then kind of peeks at the next line, okay, and it says, hey, I know I'm at this current record. I also know there's a record right behind it. Okay, so every time it reads a record, it kind of peeks to the next line and says, does something exist? That's kind of cool. So it says while this input file dot has next. So here's input file. Okay, there's a new scanner file. I say string dot friend name equals input file dot next line. Okay, so it's reading each line by line and sticking it into this variable called friend name, and then it goes ahead and says print system.out print line friend name, and then again when we're done with the file we got to make sure we close it. So if we go ahead and run this guy, and again I'm going to use that myfriend.txt, so I type in myfriend.txt and friends. It's my friends. See, I was testing you guys. Okay, so let's rerun this, and my friends.txt, and there they all are. So we take a look at this, enter the file name, there's Joe, Steve, Sue, Pam, Jose, George, and Mike. So again, it basically reads it line by line, and it knows by looking at that line, it kind of peeks to the next line, it says, I know there's another record there. So this statement right here, every time it reads a line, it knows this is basically a Boolean switch. Is there another record behind this current record? Okay, so pretty cool stuff there, not too bad. Okay, so you can see that we were able to read and write to a text file. We're able to, again, those parameters have a lot of different things kind of going on there. And again, we can always do this. You can always find out, for example, this input file, if I click behind the period and do a control space, it will show me all of the different methods that are basically allowed. Look at, boy, there is a lot going on there. So has next int, has next double. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. So again, in the book, there's a lot of, they talk about some different things as well. They talk about the print line, which is this guy right here, which basically prints that out to the console. And then again, make sure that we do the input file dot close, where we need to make sure we close that. Okay, so file read, file write. We're going to cover some more things here in a little bit.